It started as just another law enforcement tribute on The Tonight Show, until a bomb squad detective revealed that after 19 years of diffusing explosives with steady hands, she could no longer feel the difference between life and death in her fingertips. The Tonight Show studio was filled with the solemn energy that came from Jimmy Fallon's commitment to honoring law enforcement officers who put their lives on the line to protect others. Tonight's focus was on specialized units within police departments, the SWAT teams, K-9 units, cyber crimes divisions, and bomb squads that handled the most dangerous aspects of public safety. The segment was designed to shed light on the highly trained officers who dealt with situations too dangerous for regular patrol units, showcasing the incredible skill, bravery, and dedication required for these specialized roles. Jimmy had always felt deep respect for law enforcement officers, particularly those who chose assignments that brought them face to face with death on a regular basis. Among the guests was Detective Sarah Chen, a 48-year-old woman who had been working with the NYPD bomb squad for nearly 2 decades. Sarah was compact and athletic, with short black hair and intense dark eyes that seemed constantly alert, wearing a crisp Navy uniform with bomb squad insignia that immediately commanded respect. There was something about her stillness that suggested she was someone who could remain absolutely calm in the most dangerous situations. But there was also a subtle tension in her hands, the way she held them carefully, as if they were precious instruments that required constant attention. Sarah represented the elite bomb disposal experts across America who specialized in one of the most dangerous jobs in law enforcement. Jimmy had invited Sarah to share insights about explosive ordnance disposal, perhaps discuss the training required to become a bomb technician, or talk about the advanced equipment that helped keep communities safe from terrorist threats. It was supposed to be an educational conversation about a crucial but rarely understood aspect of public safety. But as Jimmy began the interview, something in Sarah's demeanor immediately suggested that this would be more than a simple explanation of bomb squad procedures. "Detective Chen," Jimmy said with his characteristic respect, 19 years with the NYPD bomb squad. That's an extraordinary career in one of the most dangerous specialties in law enforcement. Tell us what drew you to this work." Sarah smiled, but there was a weariness in her expression that seemed to go beyond normal job fatigue. "Well, Mr. Fallon, I became a bomb technician because I wanted to be involved in preventing the worst-case scenarios when there's a suspicious package, when someone calls in a bomb threat, when we discover an improvised explosive device. We're the people who stand between that danger and innocent civilians." The audience was quiet, immediately understanding the gravity of Sarah's work. "That requires incredible courage," Jimmy said. "What's it like to approach something that could literally explode at any moment?" Sarah's expression became more serious as she considered how to explain the psychological state required for her job. "Mr. Fallon, bomb disposal is all about precision, patience, and absolute control. When you're working on a device that could kill you and everyone around you, there's no room for error. Every movement has to be deliberate. Every decision has to be perfect." Jimmy leaned forward, beginning to understand the enormous pressure that Sarah faced in every operation. "The most important tools a bomb technician has are their hands," Sarah continued, looking down at her own hands as she spoke. "You need to be able to feel the difference between different types of wire, detect the subtle vibrations that might indicate a timing mechanism, sense whether a component is stable or about to fail." The studio was growing quieter as the audience began to grasp the incredible skill and nerve required for Sarah's work. "Detective Chen," Jimmy said, "in 19 years, how many explosive devices have you handled?" Sarah calculated for a moment. Over 300 confirmed devices, Mr. Fallon. Pipe bombs, pressure cooker bombs, improvised explosive devices, military ordnance from various conflicts. Some were hoaxes, some were real but simple, and some were sophisticated devices designed to kill as many people as possible. Jimmy was clearly moved by the scope of danger that Sarah had faced throughout her career. 300 devices. That's incredible. You've literally prevented hundreds of potential tragedies. Sarah nodded, but instead of pride, her expression showed something that looked like sadness and frustration. I have prevented tragedies, Mr. Fallon. But the work takes a toll that most people don't understand. Jimmy's expression shifted to concern as he sensed that Sarah was leading toward something difficult. What kind of toll? Jimmy asked gently. Sarah held up her hands, and Jimmy immediately noticed something troubling. Her fingers seemed to move with careful deliberation, as if she was consciously controlling every motion. Mr. Fallon, Sarah said, the precision required for bomb disposal means spending hours in positions that are unnatural for the human body. You're often lying on your stomach, reaching into confined spaces, manipulating tiny components while wearing heavy protective gear. But more than that, the stress of knowing that one wrong move could be fatal affects your nervous system in ways that accumulate over time. That's when Sarah revealed something that made Jimmy's heart sink. She began trying to pick up a pen from the table beside her, but her fingers fumbled with it, unable to grasp it properly. Detective Chen, Jimmy said softly, what's happening with your hands? Sarah stared at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. When she spoke, her words carried a weight that made everyone in the studio understand they were witnessing something profound and tragic. Peripheral neuropathy, she said simply. Nerve damage in my hands and fingers caused by years of repetitive stress, prolonged exposure to vibrations from explosive devices, and the cumulative effect of chronic stress on my nervous system. The studio fell completely silent. Jimmy's face showed growing alarm as he processed what Sarah had just revealed. What does that mean for your ability to continue working? Jimmy asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Sarah took a deep breath, gathering strength for the most difficult confession of her career. Mr. Fallon, bomb disposal requires absolute tactile sensitivity. You need to be able to feel the difference between a live wire and a dead one, detect whether a component is loose or secured, sense the subtle changes in resistance that might indicate a booby trap. The audience was stunned into silence, many of them beginning to understand that they were witnessing the end of a remarkable career. 3 months ago, Sarah continued, her voice beginning to break, I was called to disarm a device in a subway station. It was a sophisticated bomb with multiple fail-safes, the kind that requires hours of careful work. About halfway through the disposal process, I realized I couldn't feel the difference between the wires I was manipulating. Jimmy was openly crying now, understanding that Sarah was describing a moment when her disability could have killed not just her, but hundreds of innocent people. I had to call in my partner to complete the disposal because I couldn't trust my own hands to feel what I was doing, Sarah said, tears now flowing freely. That device was successfully disarmed, but I knew that my career as a bomb technician was over. Jimmy stood up and walked closer to Sarah, understanding that she was mourning not just the end of her career, but the loss of the abilities that had defined her professional identity. Sarah, Jimmy said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, you've spent 19 years using your hands to save lives under the most dangerous circumstances imaginable. The fact that your body is finally showing the effects of that stress doesn't diminish what you've accomplished. Sarah looked at Jimmy with tears in her eyes. Mr. Fallon, there are bomb threats happening right now that my colleagues have to handle without me. Every device I can't disarm is a device that puts other technicians at risk. or worse, put civilians in danger. Jimmy could see that Sarah was tormented by the idea that her inability to continue working might put others in danger. "When you say your career as a bomb technician is over," Jimmy asked, "what does that mean for your future?" Sarah looked around the studio, then back at Jimmy. "Next week, I'm officially transferring to the department's training division. After 19 years of being the person who approaches the bomb, I have to step away because I can no longer trust my hands to distinguish between safe and deadly." Jimmy looked directly into the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, what Detective Chen is describing represents something we rarely discuss about high-risk professions: the physical and neurological toll that extreme stress and dangerous working conditions take on the people who protect us." He turned back to Sarah. "But Detective, before you step away from active bomb disposal, I want to show you something. I want you to understand what 19 years of steady hands and perfect precision has meant to the people you've protected." Sarah looked confused. "What do you mean?" Jimmy walked to his desk and picked up his phone. "Sarah, you mentioned that you've handled over 300 explosive devices. What if we could show you the impact of those disposals? What if we could connect you with some of the people who are alive today because of your work?" Jimmy looked into the camera. "We're putting out a call right now. If Detective Sarah Chen disarmed a bomb that threatened you, your family, your workplace, or your community, we want to hear from you. Use the hashtag #Thank you Detective Chen and share how her courage and skill kept you safe." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes, social media was flooded with testimonials from people whose lives had been saved by Sarah's bomb disposal work. Stories poured in from across New York City of schools, offices, subway stations, and public events that had been threatened by explosive devices that Sarah had successfully disarmed. But Jimmy had arranged something even more powerful. Over the following week, his production team worked to track down some of the people who had been directly affected by Sarah's work, people who wanted to thank her personally for keeping them safe. The next week, Jimmy invited Sarah back to the show for what she thought would be a follow-up conversation about supporting officers with occupational injuries. Instead, he had arranged something unprecedented. "Detective Chen," Jimmy said as Sarah sat on stage, "you told me that you're haunted by the devices you can no longer disarm. Tonight I want you to meet some of the people who are safe because of the devices you have disarmed." One by one, people whose lives Sarah had protected were brought on stage via video call to thank her personally. First was Michael Rodriguez, a teacher whose elementary school had been threatened by a bomb 5 years earlier. "Detective Chen," Michael said through tears, "you probably don't remember, but you spent 8 hours disarming a device that someone had planted in our school. You worked through the night to make sure our building was safe for the children." Sarah stared at the screen with growing recognition. "P.S. 234 in Brooklyn. The device was hidden in a maintenance closet near the cafeteria." "That's right," Michael replied. "Detective Chen, because of your skill and courage, 400 children were able to return to school safely the next day. You didn't just disarm a bomb. You protected an entire generation of kids in our community." Next was Jennifer Park, whose office building had been evacuated due to a bomb threat 3 years earlier. "Detective Chen," Jennifer said, "you worked for 12 hours to disarm a complex device in our office lobby. The bomb squad told us later that if it had detonated, it could have brought down the entire building." Sarah was crying as she remembered the sophisticated device. "That was one of the most complex bombs I ever worked on. Multiple triggers, redundant systems. It took most of the night. Because of your expertise, 800 people who work in that building got to go home to their families," Jennifer replied. "My children still have their mother because you have steady hands and an incredible understanding of how these devices work." The testimonials continued for over an hour. A subway conductor whose train platform had been cleared due to a suspicious package that Sarah had determined was a real threat and successfully disarmed. A family whose apartment building had been evacuated when a device was found in their lobby. A college student whose graduation ceremony had been threatened by a bomb that Sarah had rendered safe. Each story revealed not just Sarah's technical expertise, but the ripple effects of her work. Families kept together, communities protected, public spaces kept safe from those who would use terror as a weapon. Perhaps the most powerful testimony came from Maria Santos, a young mother whose daycare center had been threatened by a bomb 2 years earlier. "Detective Chen," Maria said, "I know you're struggling with not being able to work on devices anymore, but I want you to know something. The bomb you disarmed at Little Angel's daycare didn't just save the 37 children who were there that day. It saved their futures, their families' futures, and their community's sense of safety." Sarah was overwhelmed, crying as she realized that her career had protected not just individual lives, but entire communities from terror and trauma. "Detective Chen," Maria continued, "your hands may not be able to feel wires anymore, but they've been steady when it mattered most. Every child who played safely in that daycare after you cleared the threat is a reminder of your incredible service." As the testimonials concluded, Jimmy turned to Sarah, who was surrounded virtually by dozens of people whose safety she had ensured. "Detective Chen," Jimmy said, "you told me that you were troubled by the devices you can no longer disarm. But what we've seen tonight is that you've created a legacy of safety and protection that extends far beyond any single bomb disposal." Jimmy looked directly into the camera. "And to everyone watching, Detective Chen's story reminds us that the officers who handle our most dangerous threats often sacrifice their own physical well-being to keep us safe." He turned back to Sarah, "which is why we're announcing the Detective Sarah Chen First Responder Health Foundation, which will provide medical care, occupational therapy, and support for officers dealing with job-related injuries and disabilities." 6 months later, Sarah had become one of the most respected bomb disposal trainers in the country, teaching new technicians the skills and safety protocols she had developed over 19 years in the field. The Health Foundation had provided support for dozens of officers with occupational injuries. More importantly, Sarah's story had brought attention to the long-term health effects faced by bomb disposal experts and other high-risk specialists, leading to new safety protocols and regular health monitoring for officers in dangerous assignments. Sarah learned that stepping away from active bomb disposal didn't mean her career was over. It meant finding new ways to protect people by training the next generation of bomb technicians with the wisdom and experience she had gained. And the thousands of people whose safety she had ensured learned that sometimes the greatest gift they could give their protector was the knowledge that steady hands had created steady communities where families could live without fear. Because sometimes the people who defuse bombs need to be reminded that they've also diffused fear, and that trembling fingers in the present don't erase the steady courage that protected the past.